Vanessa Martin had never imagined her life with anything less than panoramic city views. Tall skyscrapers, narrow townhouses packed in neat rows, bustling coffee shops, it was all she knew. She moved through downtown avenues in her sleek black sedan, radio humming softly, balancing real estate listings that demanded her razor-sharp attention. She was more than just successful. She was the kind of city realtor whose phone rarely stopped buzzing and whose schedule rarely had a blank space. If there was a pristine penthouse or a posh suite up for sale, Vanessa was the one with the inside track. She often told people she was married to the hustle, a phrase she could say with a confident toss of her wavy dark hair. If a prospective client wanted a view of the city skyline from their new high-rise, Vanessa had it on file. She never missed a sale. She kept business lunches scheduled, coffees short, and cocktails for the sophisticated set. Yet, in the back of her mind, something nagged at her, a sensational emptiness that she dismissed as mere fatigue. It was the kind that made her dream of simpler days or more peaceful nights. But few big city professionals had time to dwell on intangible cravings for deeper meaning. She buried any sense of longing underneath immaculate suits and color-coded calendars. On a bright Tuesday morning, an email dinged in her inbox from Debbie, a representative at a small hometown charity. The message was polite, making a somewhat unusual request. The local chapter ran a youth outreach program in a rural area, and they needed some real estate expertise to navigate a property donation. A neglected farmhouse had been bequeathed to them, a chance to shelter young women facing homelessness. Small print, tax forms, property language that confused them. Debbie hoped Vanessa, as a recommended volunteer, might be able to help. The email read, "We've heard you're the best in the market. We could really use your experience." Vanessa's first reaction was annoyance. She seldom offered her services for free, but Debbie's email was earnest, and the neglected farmhouse was only 2 hours away from the city. Vanessa reminded herself she had promised her boss she'd increase community outreach to show the firm's philanthropic spirit. "All right," she murmured, "I'll do this once." She replied to Debbie in a swift flurry of keystrokes and promised a site visit on the upcoming weekend. The morning of the visit arrived. Vanessa slid into her sedan at dawn, expecting a brief, awkward meeting with a plucky charity rep, a quick once-over of some dusty old house, then a polite handshake. She would scurry back to city life, prompt. But after an hour of driving and leaving behind the concrete sprawl, she found the highway gave way to rolling farmland, dotted with cows and splintered fences. Trees she'd only glimpsed from penthouse views now stood tall at the road's edges, enveloping her in green corridors. Her shoulders felt oddly lighter. The silence, punctuated by birdsong, was foreign, yet strangely comforting. By the time she arrived, Debbie was already waiting, where a meandering, bumpy driveway ended before a peeling white farmhouse. Vanessa stepped out, stilettos meeting gravel, still wearing her black suit and holding her laptop bag. Debbie, a friendly woman with a warm smile, wore jeans and boots, practical and unassuming. "Thanks so much for coming," Debbie exclaimed as she extended her hand. "We really appreciate it. The donation deal is a bit complicated, but we're trying to transform this old property into a safe home for young women in need. It's going to take a lot of work. The foundation is cracked in places and the roof needs fixing, but the farmland around it is beautiful, and we think there's a lot of potential. We want to open next year, if we can." Vanessa nodded, reminding herself to manage expectation. "I'm glad to help," she said with a professional smile. "Let's take a look." As they approached the farmhouse, the wind blew through tall grasses and the porch steps creaked. Paint peeled off the clapboards and a half-torn window screen flapped in the breeze. By Vanessa's usual standards, the place was beyond unsellable. Her practiced eye caught signs of water damage on the windowsills and rotting planks. Inside, the living room floors sagged in the center, and a musty odor hung in the air, the ghosts of disuse clinging to every surface. Still, there was something heartbreakingly beautiful about it. The wide spaces, the high ceilings, the farmland visible through every window. It had a haunting charm she couldn't dismiss. She found herself tracing the faded floral wallpaper, imagining the family who once lived here. Maybe children had run in and out, their muddy shoes scuffing the floor. Perhaps they'd gathered around a big wooden table for Sunday supper. In her mind's eye, she could see the place bursting with life. Debbie's eyes sparkled. I can picture a study room here, mentorship sessions in the living room, a big kitchen next door for communal cooking. The farmland around back might become a community garden, a place for them to rehabilitate in nature and find hope. It's big enough for farming, therapy animals, whatever we can manage. But the legalities and the renovations are daunting. And, well, that's where we hope you can help. For the remainder of the morning, Vanessa meticulously went through property documents, explaining the complexities of the title transfer. She detailed how Debbie's charitable organization could claim certain benefits, and she mapped out a plan. The realtor part of her was engaged, but the human part of her seemed to awaken as well. For once, this was not about an elegant penthouse sale. It was about changing lives. That realization lit something inside her she hadn't felt in a long time. When she finally drove away, she found herself thinking about all the ways that old farmhouse could be revived. She started emailing contractor friends for quotes, even though no one had asked. By the time she parked in her city driveway that evening, she had scribbled a dozen notes on how to raise funds for renovations. She told herself she'd simply done her due diligence, yet something tugged at her heart, an eagerness to see that transformation happen. Over the following weeks, Vanessa threw herself into the project. She discovered that Debbie's organization needed not just a volunteer, but a champion, someone who could orchestrate the entire renovation. In between her usual flurry of city real estate deals, she spent late nights reviewing structural plans. Whenever Debbie called with an update or question, Vanessa would pick up, ignoring the time. She recommended plumbers, electricians, carpenters, all from her professional network. At first, her contacts balked at the idea of working pro bono on a dilapidated farmhouse. But Vanessa's determination and the noble cause wore them down. Soon, she had a lineup of city contractors ready to pitch in, each offering discounted services. At the same time, people from the rural community learned about the cause. Farmers offered spare lumber, a local hardware store donated supplies, teenagers from the neighboring high school volunteered to clean up the yard, elders who remembered the farmhouse in its heyday showed up with hot casseroles to feed the workers. The transformation was slow but steady, and at the center of it all was Vanessa, toggling between her laptop and phone, bridging the city swirl of resources and the local kindness that flowed so generously. Every Saturday, she made the 2-hour drive in the early morning, returning late at night. With every visit, the farmhouse looked slightly less forlorn. Walls were patched, floors were reinforced, fresh paint went up on the siding, and volunteers hammered shingles onto the roof. Beneath the rustic arcs of farmland skies, Vanessa felt a peculiar energy, one that came neither from corporate success nor from the clang of skyscraper developments. It was the energy of belonging, of neighbors coming together for a cause that truly mattered. Somewhere along the way, she stopped wearing pencil skirts and high heels when she visited. Instead, she turned up in old jeans and work boots, her hair pulled back. She realized she didn't mind the sweat and the stray streak of paint across her arms. Her once carefully manicured nails were now chipped, but she found it liberating. She was on her knees, scrubbing away grime and laughing with farmers she had only just met that morning. When they teased her about her city accent or gentle squeamishness at the sight of mice, she laughed along, feeling at once foolish and strangely proud. This was work that felt vital. One particular Saturday afternoon, she stayed later than anticipated, going over the volunteer shift schedule with Debbie. The sun sank beyond the horizon, painting the sky crimson over the farmland. Debbie invited her to a community potluck at the local barn, promising warm food and a slice of real country life. Vanessa hesitated, eyeing the time. She had a Sunday morning meeting with a potential condo buyer, but something deep inside her was reluctant to hurry back to the city just yet. She realized she wanted to see more. The potluck was a modest affair, full of homemade casseroles, fresh vegetables, and pies bearing the earthy sweetness of orchard apples. Lanterns hung overhead, illuminating the wooden beams of the barn. Young children ran between hay bales, laughing, while fiddlers played tunes on a makeshift stage. To her surprise, Vanessa found tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She'd never realized how starved her spirit was for simple fellowship. She sat at a wooden picnic table chatting with a retired baker, a volunteer nurse, and a local mechanic about the differences between city and rural life. They asked how she liked the farmland. Sheepishly, she confessed she loved the hush of it all, the sense of anchoring. She explained she'd spent so many years building an image around real estate glamour that she'd overlooked the unadorned joys of genuine community. They nodded in understanding, offering her paper plates loaded with more food than she could eat. She stayed for hours, eventually dancing under the soft glow of string lights. By the time she tumbled into bed at a local inn, she felt more at peace than she had in years. Her personal transformation, however, didn't erase her professional obligations in the city. She still raced between showings and closings throughout the week. Busy clients demanded her attention, and she gave it without fail. But her weekends became non-negotiable. She refused to schedule any tours on Saturdays now, which baffled her colleagues. They teased her gently about her farm project, while some asked if she'd grown bored of city real estate. She told them no, she just had an important commitment. They shrugged, chalking it up to an eccentric fling. But to Vanessa, it was everything. Day by day, the farmhouse morphed. Contractors replaced decaying boards and painted the exterior in a fresh white. The roof now had new, sturdy shingles. The porch railing was fixed, the front yard cleared of weeds, revealing a quaint walkway that led from the driveway to the steps. Inside, the old wallpaper was painstakingly removed, replaced by clean, neutral colors that brightened the room. Little by little, with each stroke of a paintbrush and with every hammered nail, a sturdy home took shape. One day, a volunteer asked Vanessa why a hotshot realtor would care so much. She paused, uncertain how to describe the intangible sense of purpose that had taken hold of her. Because, for the first time, she said slowly, what I do with a property matters more than a paycheck. If we succeed, these young women will have a chance to rebuild their lives, and I can't think of a more important outcome. When it came time to install the final touches, Vanessa led a donation drive at her firm. She reached out to furniture stores for lightly used pieces and found donors for new mattresses. A local interior designer offered to help with the finishing details, balancing style with comfort. Decorative pillows, lamps, and rugs arrived in trucks from all around, a patchwork of generosity. The once empty rooms now looked warm and inviting, each bed carefully made, each dresser lovingly repurposed. Word spread that the farmhouse was nearing completion. Debbie and her team made plans for a grand opening day, a celebration of new beginnings. Invitations went out to the local townspeople, the volunteers, and the donors from the city. In only a few months, a property once forsaken had become a beacon of hope. Still, there were final checks to do, last-minute painting, cleaning, and administrative tasks. The night before the official unveiling, Vanessa worked late in one of the freshly refurbished bedrooms, finishing some paperwork that would secure the final permits for the charity to operate. She glanced out the window, noticing how the stars glimmered against the velvet country sky far, more vivid than the city lights she was used to. The hush out here was no longer unsettling. It was comforting. Suddenly, Debbie entered with 2 mugs of hot tea, pulling up a small stool. Setting down her laptop, Vanessa realized how exhausted she was, but also how proud. With her guard lowered, she admitted to Debbie how unfulfilled she'd been for years, despite her success. I thought I was living the dream in the city, but chasing those big commissions, there was something missing. And now, seeing this place come together, I feel more satisfied than I ever have in my entire career. Debbie patted her shoulder. It shows in your work. This project wouldn't have happened as quickly without you. Sometimes we need a chance to create something that goes beyond ourselves. They were silent for a long time, sipping their tea, letting the moment wash over them. Then, as they parted for the night, Vanessa felt a surge of gratitude that overwhelmed her. She glimpsed her reflection in the bedroom mirror, noticing her dusty jeans, short nails, and paint-splattered arms. She wore none of her typical realtor polish, yet she'd never felt more congruent with her true self. The next day dawned bright and crisp. The farmhouse shone in the morning light, its windows glinting, its porch freshly swept. Banners hung near the driveway reading, "Welcome to the new beginnings." Volunteers bustled about, setting up folding chairs and refreshments for the ceremony. Vanessa dressed in a simple blouse and slacks, a small nod to her professional side, but still comfortable enough to haul chairs if needed. Cars began to arrive, locals in pickups, donors from the city in sleek sedans, a few news crews curious about the charity's success story. Debbie greeted everyone with wide smiles and introduced them to the property, pointing out the improvements. Volunteers who'd come each Saturday marveled at how different the home looked with final decorations in place. The wallpaper in the living room had been replaced by a light sage paint, showcasing local art that depicted farmland motifs. The old staircase banister gleamed with fresh varnish. The once saggy floors felt sturdy underfoot. Vanessa watched a group of young women walk in hesitantly, each chosen to be among the first residents. Ranging in age from late teens to early 20s, they looked uncertain, but their eyes lit up when they saw their rooms. She overheard one whisper to another, "We can really stay here?" Her friend nodded, hugging her. Vanessa felt her throat tighten. She realized that everything she'd done, from the phone calls to the heated negotiations with contractors to personally scrubbing the floorboards, had been worth it for that moment alone. Gathering everyone on the new porch, Debbie offered a short speech, voice trembling with emotion. She thanked the donors, volunteers, and especially Vanessa, calling her the driving force behind the transformation. Politely embarrassed by the praise, Vanessa stepped forward. She took the microphone, scanning the crowd for a moment. She saw in their faces a mixture of joy, admiration, and relief. She spotted the city contractors who had traveled every weekend, the local farmers who'd brought fresh produce, and the new residents clutching each other's hands for support. She cleared her throat. This wasn't just about flipping a house, it was about building a sanctuary. I've worked with plenty of properties, but never one that could directly change so many lives. Working on this, I learned that real estate is more than business. It's about community. You've all taught me that, and I'm so grateful to be a part of it. The crowd erupted in applause, cheers echoing over the open fields. Cameras clicked, capturing the image of the renovated farmhouse and the smiling faces on the porch. Then, as if on cue, the fiddlers from the barn potluck began to play a sprightly tune, and the gathering turned from ceremony into celebration. Some volunteers danced on the grass, others chatted animatedly in small groups. Several city visitors admitted they envied the beauty and serenity of the agricultural surroundings. In a quieter corner of the yard, Vanessa was approached by one of her big city real estate colleagues who had donated furniture. He said softly, "I never realized how meaningful your volunteer project was. Seeing it all come together, this is phenomenal." Vanessa smiled. "We all contributed, really. I just coordinated the details." He laughed. "Well, I've never known you to be so genuinely happy, either." Later, as the festivities continued, Vanessa strolled along the fence line that separated the farmhouse from the broader farmland. She took a moment to breathe in the sweet air. She had a list of city properties left to sell, a busy schedule waiting for her tomorrow, but she realized she wouldn't be leaving this place completely behind. She planned to stay involved, to check in on the home's progress, and maybe even come to more barn dances. As she gazed at the field of wildflowers beyond the fence, she allowed herself to imagine a new personal horizon. Perhaps a simpler one, or at the very least, a life that balanced success with service. Twilight settled, painting swaths of coral and lavender across the sky. Families who had come to show support started packing up, the older folks giving one last wave to the new residents stepping tentatively into their dreams. Debbie threw her arms around Vanessa in a tight hug, tears in her eyes as she said, "We did it." Vanessa blinked back tears of her own. "We did. But it doesn't end here. The real work, helping these residents start a new life, is just beginning." Debbie nodded, gratitude etched on her face. "And we'll be there, all of us." With the official opening behind them, folks helped fold chairs and tidy the yard. Lena walked through the freshly painted living room one last time, the floors now boasting a warm glow under new soft lighting. She could already see how, in the coming weeks, the halls would be filled with conversations, laughter, perhaps even tears. but no longer would they echo with neglect. It was a start, a real, hopeful start. Before leaving, she poked her head into the kitchen, where one of the future residents stood at the sink, running water into a glass. The young woman smiled shyly at Vanessa. "They said you're the one who helped save this place," she murmured. "Thank you. I can't wait to make it feel like home." Vanessa's eyes stung with tears again. "I'm so glad you're here. Wishing you the best of everything." The drive back to the city felt different that night. The road was dark, illuminated now and again by her headlights. She had a sense that something within her had fundamentally shifted. The once unyielding thirst for high-end success had found a more meaningful companion, a desire to connect, to build, to nurture. She wasn't planning to abandon her career. She was good at her job after all, but she would never again be the kind of realtor who thought only about the money or the shimmer of city lights. She knew she wanted to keep bridging these two worlds. As the urban skyline rose in the distance, Vanessa smiled, reflecting on her new perspective. She would return to her city office the next day. She would juggle phone calls, schedule showings, and talk to clients about investment property. But under her pressed blazer, she would carry memories of farmland laughter and the profound fulfillment of helping to transform a broken house into a refuge. If any of her colleagues asked her about the project, she'd simply share the story of how a forgotten farmhouse, far from the glittering towers of downtown, had reminded her, indeed, taught her, that true wealth is measured not only in profit, but in the lives touched and the community strengthened. And in that knowledge, she found a joy she had never known before.